We got a lot to cover. Good evening, everyone. I'm Bill Bowie. Welcome to our committee and board meetings this evening, October the 12th, 2022. It's 5:30 and I'll make the requisite motions so that we can conduct these meetings virtually. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and the Fairfax County Emergency Ordinance, the Park Authority Board needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record, as we did at our first electronic meeting. During our meeting, if you wish to be recognized, please raise your hand, and when I recognize you, please state your name. This will ensure that you are recognized and the public knows who is speaking. If you intend to vote nay or abstain on any item, we will need to do a roll call on those votes. Because each member of the board is participating in these meetings from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all of the other members. And accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each board member participating in these meetings to state your name and the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. And following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member's voice, and we'll go alphabetically. As the evening progresses, if additional board members join us for our meetings, I will ask them to verify their audibility and their location. Dr. Adu.
Abna Adu, joining from my residence in Franconia District.
Dr. Carter. Not here yet. Maggie Godbold.
Maggie Godbold, joining from my home in the Sully District.
Linwood Gorham.
Linwood Gorham, joining from my home in the Mount Vernon District.
Tim Hackman.
Tim Hackman, participating from my residence in the Drainsville District.
Faisal Khan.
Faisal Khan at my residence in Providence District.
Ken Quincy.
Ken Quincy, participating from my residence in the Providence District.
Kyle Stone.
Kyle Stone, participating from the Fairfax campus of George Mason University.
Mike Thompson.
Mike Thompson, participating from my office in Alexandria.
Jim Zook.
Jim Zook, participating from my home in the Springfield District.
Ron Kendall is absent and excused this evening. I'm Bill Bowie, and I'm participating from my residence in the Hunter Mill District. At this point, I will pass the virtual gavel over to Vice Chairman Godbold so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of this board.
Maggie Godbold here. You all have heard the motion. Is there a second?
This is Mike Thompson. I second the motion.
Thanks, Mike. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. That motion passes.
Thank you, Maggie. This is Bill Bowie. Second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures, the fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the board to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. And that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of this board and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that this board may conduct this meeting wholly electronically via Zoom. It is so moved.
This is Maggie Godbold. You all have heard the motion. Is there a second?
Tim Hackman, I second.
Thank you, Tim. Is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Mr. Chairman, the motion's approved.
Thank you very much, Maggie. Now, with the preliminary matters complete, we can start the Budget Committee meeting and turn it over to Chairman Quincy.
Ken Quincy, and I will call the Budget Committee meeting to order and turn it over to Mr. Mike Peter.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Quincy. This is Mike Peter, Administration Division Director at the Park Authority, and I'm pleased to continue our series of discussions on our general fund budget request items. Tonight, we have put this forward as an action item, and there is one small change we'll talk about in just a moment. Ultimately, what we'll be asking for is to go through and see if there's a recommendation to endorse this for the entire board later this evening to approve forwarding these general fund budget requests. Next slide, please. So once again, just to show everyone where we are, we're in October and we are finalizing our baseline budget requests. We will be submitting those to the Department of Management and Budget after we move through the motions this evening, hopefully. And then things will be considered. There'll be a whole lot more work with our equity consultants and other things that will be happening through the end of the calendar year. We will then have the county executive's advertised budget plan released in February, and we'll go through the regular process then as well. Next slide, please. So with that, we've gone through these pieces. Just, to remind everyone, we came forward with a plan in June. And we reviewed our initial planning, our year-end results, and our high-level goals and objectives. In August, we held our internal department engagement where we worked to identify the priority areas and identify different areas for possible investment. Next slide, please. And then we went through the process with the board. Now, through each step, as we've been posting the documents, we've had public comment that has been opened. And in the board package, you will see the public comments that were received through the end of last week. We have about 3 or 4 more comments that have come in since then that we'll add to the minutes as well, all generally showing support for the initiatives that we've pulled together and had the opportunity to discuss during these meetings. Next slide, please. So out of all of the different items that we put together, we had one major adjustment on the forestry request. After discussion with the board and public comment and some other discussions that occurred here. If you remember, this was originally requesting $358,000 to augment our contract budget for the removal of high-risk trees to make sure that we're not dipping into the rest of the park operations maintenance budget. And the changes are adding some additional merit FTE, tree care specialists to help in removing these trees and dealing with our canopy, and then ultimately also having an urban forester on staff to help with the proactive planning once we get caught up with these more higher risk areas. So this has increased this request to $639,974. Next slide, please. And to remind everyone, we've broken these into 2 separate overall categories. This is what we call our regular operating budget impact set of requests here. These are not prioritized because we are making the case that these are all required for us to continue doing business as we've been doing business. This is how much things have increased for us to be able to respond to the needs with the current operations that we've been employing over the last several years. So you see our CPI increases, the summer concert series request, our maintenance and stabilization for new parks and acquisitions, and then bamboo removal on parkland. So for that baseline, not looking at salary or anything else, these are the baseline items totaling $1.276 million. Next slide, please. Now here, this totals $4.45 million. These are all of the requests that we have put together and prioritized, which we discussed at the last meeting. The top priority, of course, being the One Fairfax Equity consultation request, which is still a TBD as we're working that through with the consultants, and we'll talk much more with the Park Authority Board and the Board of Supervisors about what that looks like as we're looking at the revenue model. Within this, on item number 7, that also did increase slightly by about $20,000, just because we made sure that we added the correct type of positions there to be able to operate those mobile nature centers. So it's just a higher here to $4.47 million. Next slide, please. And we're continuing the discussions on our other long-term issues, the synthetic turf field replacement cycle. This next slide will not be a surprise either. We're continuing to have this discussion, but again, this is outside of those priorities. This is what we need to be able to continue funding and managing the replacement of all of our synthetic turf fields that are used in the community on a regular basis. Next slide, please. So, Mr. Quincy, that is just the recap of what we're putting forward. As I said, we have included the public comment that has come through, and we'll have a little bit more to attach to the minutes. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to you, and I'm happy to answer
Just
any
one
questions.
second, Mike. Can I just, sorry, Jay Cole, Executive Director, Park Authority. Before we turn it back over, I just wanted to, a couple things within the budget slide. I've been talking across the street to DMB, and this is likely going to be a particularly tight budget year because the market rate adjustment is going to be fairly high for staff, which is very good news for staff. So we're exploring ways to some of the things that we are identified here of alternative funding structures, specifically for the trash and recycling, to sort of scoot it over to the because it's part of the Zero Waste County initiative, and there might be other ways to fund that ask. Some with forestry about maybe of looking into, how we're going to fund some of the contract work, and then with the fields. So the items will stay. There's just a little bit of talking across the street to try to figure out how we can make this happen if the funds aren't quite all available through the general fund. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Ken Quincy, any other comments, questions? Linwood?
Every year, we go through this, and it's often talked about, the state of the budget for the entire county and everything. But I got to tell you, I'm going to be just a little bit blunt here. We are such a small part of that, and they could double our budget, and it would still be less than 2%, barely over 1% of the entire county budget. So when we're always asked to go along with everybody else and be in such a small and, in my opinion, underfunded part of the county budget, boy, I don't like to hear that we're not going to get pretty much what we're asking for. None of it's unreasonable.
Thank you, Linwood. All right, any other questions, comments?
Yeah, Ken,
Yes,
this is Mike.
Mike, I'm sorry.
That's right. I just didn't know if you could see me.
I couldn't.
This is Mike Thompson. One question about that I'm thinking about in terms of this presentation. There are certain things that, as I understand it, and Jay, I think you referred actually to one of them, that we're doing in part because of a county board of supervisors initiative. What I'm wondering is, shouldn't we designate those in some way? I don't know if it's a footnote, a highlight, a big circle that says, you guys are saying that we have to do this, therefore you should really help it. Ultimately it's all their money anyway. You should fund that which you have told us we have to do, because, I'm thinking about whether it's the zero trash removal that you mentioned. I think the bamboos the same way. If we're now going to be required to do those and maybe some of these other things, it just seems to me we should designate and highlight that so that either the public, staff from the across the street, staff for the board of supervisors, the supervisors themselves understand that not funding those things doesn't take away our obligation to do them, and therefore is actually a reduction in services for other stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly, you're reading my mind. That's exactly what my talks across the street have been, is to separate them out because our ask looks very large. If you add $2 million for trash and recycling, $500,000 for the bamboo removal, both of which are ordinances. Then you add in the field stuff, which is a great thing to do. But again, it's something that was given to us as our responsibility. If you add those in, and even if we're funded it fully at those, and then that's our parks ask, there's nothing that moves us forward in the things that we need to be doing ourselves as a parks department. And so we absolutely, they understand that. I spoke to Chris Leonard today, especially with the fields, they get it. I'm trying to put everything in the silos to say cumulatively it might look like this, but these two things were a direct result of the ordinance and the zero waste 6-year plan. We're the largest landowners in the county. We've got to be taking care of our trash and the recycling in order to move forward with the zero waste plan. This is how much it's going to cost. Fields, we need to get them up because we have a responsibility now that it's been given to us, but it's not fully funded at the level to be doing the replacement fields. And the bamboo ordinance is, again, we're going to get cited if we don't do them, and bamboo is expensive. But we also need a little bit, and if you separate those out, what's left is not a huge lift, but cumulatively it looks like a very large lift because it's conflating those large pieces. So yeah, that's absolutely the conversation that that I'm having across the street that we're having.
Yeah, this is Mike again. No, I appreciate that. I'm just suggesting that like on written material, like what we're looking at, we may want to call that out more so that folks who are not as close to this as we are recognize the issue. And I'll give you an example. I thought about the priority list 1 to 10. The one Fairfax equity consultation request. I'm going to make up a number. I have no idea what it's going to cost. Let's say it's $500,000. If somebody looked at this and said, well, you got your number 1 request, we just couldn't do your number 2 request. That's actually a $1.3 million hit on us because we still have to do the zero waste trash removal and recycling. I mean, we're still obligated to do it. So I think we need to, I think we should be thinking about this not only as a document for our conversations, but also as a document for educating the public and our advocates so that they have the information necessary to support what we're doing, but also so that staff across the street can come to certain conclusions more quickly because they'll see it in writing before maybe they've heard from you or from their boss who talked to you.
I think we can put a finer point on it. I do want to make the point of, when we talk about the absorb word, the big A absorbing word, that's all well and good for $40,000, $50,000. $2 million is not an absorbable number. So I would say we have to do it. We can't. So the question would become, are we going to get cited by DPWES for not being able to come up with do the zero waste when we just can't? I mean, the bins, there are physical aspects of that needs to be purchased. This is not just work harder and pick up trash type.
Right.
Do we want to do it? Absolutely, because we're good stewards of our land and our park system. But I think that we can work on in the submission putting a little bit of finer point on it and a little bit of history, because I think that people don't understand the turf replacement thing, and maybe citing the ordinance that came in just to make it very, very clear that these are these are what the board approved. If you'd like us to do it, then this is how much it's going to cost, which is completely separate from what the park authority needs to do to move forward even even incrementally into what it is that we need to go. It's a very good point. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions, Ken Quincy? I think those are good points, both from Linwood, Mike, and Jay. Very worth considering.
Ken, I think Kyle has a question.
I'm sorry.
Oh, good, Ken. Thank you. This is Kyle Stone. Sarah, a couple of years ago, speaking in the vein of trying to find some other funding sources for some of these as opposed to straight general revenue, didn't we push the county a couple of years ago on the pest management fund to help fund some of the forestry stuff? Did that happen? Did that fall apart? What's the deal with that?
Yeah, Sarah Baldwin, Deputy Director. Yes, it did happen, and we are receiving, and Kevin may be able to tell, Kevin's on the line, tell us how much we're using of the pest fund every year, but any any trees that are taken down as a result of the pests that are included on that ordinance, we use pest funding. And Kevin, I don't know if you want to add to that, but yes, and that was successful. And that was a result of, the advocacy that was done by all of you to get additional funding for forestry.
Thanks.
Yeah, I can add, we're allocated $250,000. Sorry, Kevin Williams, Park Operations. We're allocated $250,000 a year for the ash tree issue, and we're spending roughly 150 to no more than 200 here recently. So just to give you a number on that.
Okay. Any other questions, discussion? Ken Quincy, if there isn't any, is there consensus to move this item forward for the full board?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. That concludes the Budget Committee items, so I hereby adjourn the Budget Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Quincy. And now it's time for the Administrative and Board Management Committee, and I'll turn it over to Chairman Faisal Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, this is Faisal Khan. I call to the order for Administration Board Committee meeting to order. And Bobby, would you please present the items?
Yes. This is Roberta Longworth, and I am the Executive Director of the Fairfax County Park Foundation. I'm also here to introduce the Fairfax County Park Foundation bylaws revision, and am joined on this meeting by Park Foundation Board Chair Anita Herrera.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I will discuss a little bit about our history here with the bylaws. The Park Foundation has been working on these bylaws for quite some time. And on July 19th, the board of the Park Foundation voted to approve the recommended bylaws that were shared with the senior management of the Park Authority and the Park Authority Board Committee and that was on July 28th, and recommended that the draft be reviewed, and we received feedback on August 10th. And we discussed that feedback on the 18th, and then provided some comments back to the executive, the board, the Park Authority Board Committee, and senior management. And senior management provided feedback, or actually considered the feedback provided by the Park Foundation on September 13th. And as such, voted to include the recommended edit as discussed by the Park Foundation. Then the Park Foundation bylaws draft with the included edit were presented to the Park Authority senior management on October 3rd. And today, Bobby and I are here to present this version of the bylaws to the Park Authority Board Committee. And at this point, I assume that everyone has seen it. Just as a brief summary, as the Park Foundation looked at the bylaws that were originally drafted for the Park Foundation, the Park Foundation views itself as more mature and able to address the bylaws more directly and have some authority and ownership for what it says. Fundamentally, I would say that there really is no changes to what the Park Authority intended in creating the Park Foundation. We rely on the Park Authority to confirm our board members, our board directors, and confirm any donations we receive. We are here essentially to provide find funding for the Park Authority, and therefore we rely on the Park Authority Board to confirm those types of activities. And the bylaws are drafted accordingly. There was a recommendation by the Park Authority Board to limit any Park Authority employees from joining the Park Foundation Board within 3 years of leaving their position. And so we have added that, and that was what was previously discussed and is now included in the bylaws, which were not there before. So with that, I'm going to ask if there are any questions.
Anything, any question, discussion? Well, okay. Dr. Carter.
Greetings.
Excuse me, Dr. Carter.
Dr. Carter, would you?
Cynthia.
Thank you.
This is Dr. Cynthia Jacobs Carter, and I am participating from my home in Lee District. Thank you. So I remember some discussion about this in our last foundation meeting about the 3 years, and I thought there was other discussion about it being less than 3 years. Could you please speak to that?
Well, this is actually, quite frankly, we took the advice of Jay that this was a way to manage any influence that employees from the Park Authority might have on the various fundraising efforts. So quite frankly, I really appreciated the 3-year period. And in terms of any lesser period, just felt that that may just be a little bit too short in order to really be an effective limitation.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted clarity because I know that point had been discussed back and forth about 2 years or 3 years. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other comments, discussion? All right, Jim.
Yes, thank you, Jim Zook. I've just got a big question mark about a 3-year separation. I just having trouble understanding why that would be necessary. Maybe there are conflicts of interest that I don't understand, but I understand the foundation is all a volunteer organization. So I just don't understand, how this got to be where it is with the 3 years. I don't know whether anybody can explain that to me or not. Thanks.
As I said, Jay provided some background on that, and it did seem to be reasonable that in the course of the employment for the Park Authority, there could be some preferences. And there could be some efforts that might be directly related to work that was done at the Park Authority level that could then come into one of these fundraising efforts and have an influence either for or against. I don't know if Jay would like to add any more color to that.
Sure. So Jay Cole, Executive Director, Park Authority. Part of the impetus is just they're the first ones out of the gate. Not so much this is to solve any particular issue that's happening in the Park Foundation. What we're trying to do is create a bit of a gap between staff working in at Park Authority and then being on any of the volunteer boards of any of the volunteer organizations to allow that sort of space for the new person coming in to be able to affect changes or go a different direction or whatever it is. It just, we're looking at it and it seems to be that there's a potential for things to get a little messy. And I use the example of myself, whereas if I were to leave my position and then tomorrow become, you know, the chairman or the director of the Park Foundation, then I would spend all my time telling Amy and Sarah exactly what it is that I've always wanted to do, but I was hindered by, you know, my government paycheck. So it's just a little bit of breathing room in order to make sure that there's that separation of things to allow, you know, new people to come in and impact the organization or the group. I hope that answers that question.
All right, anything else? Anybody?
I guess I could understand if it were, as Jay described, a prior employee moving into an executive director position with the Park Foundation. I just think you might be losing some talent that might have some passion. And, obviously that can still happen, I guess, 3 years later. Anyway, thank you.
This is Bobby Longworth, Executive Director of the Park Foundation. I have something to add that might help. This wouldn't preclude someone from joining in a voluntary basis, but not as a voting board director of the Park Foundation. And if I might add, the idea is that hopefully we can set an example for friends groups and others as well, where there may have been a bit of a conflict.
And I suppose I would add, this is Anita Herrera again, I would just add to Bobby's comment that the Park Foundation prides itself in being somewhat independent of specific projects within the Park Authority. It is somewhat akin to the directors being almost all of them being somewhat like independent directors in a corporation, bringing in some balance to ensure that there isn't any skewing towards any particular district or likewise away from any particular district because of a personal interest in a particular project. So I think that is the effort here, is to avoid having that type of preference coming on to the board and being a voting member to have that level of influence.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, great. So do we have the consensus to move this forward to the full board?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So thank you, Bobby and Ms. Herrera. And now we move to the next item. Allison, would you please introduce the next item?
Yes, thank you. My name is Allison Rankin. And we are going to talk about the next chunk of policies in the policy manual. So 300 policies of what we're going to tackle tonight. Again, this is the process that we're going through as we trudge through this. Tonight, we're going to talk about Objective 300 and 301 through 306. So starting off, Objective 300, we made some slight tweaks to this just to make the language more reflective of the updated mission. The mission was updated sort of in concurrence with the policy manual review last cycle, and the language we felt here should be updated with that to reflect the new mission statement.
Mr. Chairman, how would you like us to comment? Wait to the end or as we address each policy? This is Tim Hackman.
Well, it's either way. I think we might as well let them finish and then ask all the questions in the end. That'll
Okay.
just keep the flow of the presentation.
Some of the items are pretty different than the others. We kind of really skipping around if we do it that way.
Well, okay, what's the consensus about it? If everybody wants to go one at a time, you can do that as well. I mean, there's no hard and fast rule. So either way, well, Okay, so let's just get started and we'll take it one at a time then. Allison?
Okay. Tim, did you have questions on?
Yeah, this is Tim Hackman. Yes, I did have a question on the mission statement. It talks, I think, about preserving natural and cultural heritage. I'm not sure what preserving natural heritage really means, and so my alternate wording there would be potentially to say provide for a healthy environment and stewardship of stewardship of natural resources and preserve cultural heritage. Something along those lines.
This is Linwood. I have a comment about that statement also. And hopefully they can be discussed together, or maybe mine, some people will think mine's related to Tim's. It is actually a little bit different. We're using the language to promote healthy lifestyles. And this just kind of hits me that maybe it's not our job to be promoting things, but providing opportunities for things or serving the public. Promote to me is a little bit about we know better than you and you should do this thing. Anyway, obviously a small issue, but my thoughts on the issue.
So just to clarify, Sarah Baldwin, Deputy Director, our current mission statement, the wording is taken from that. So promoting is part of the current mission statement. So if you would like, we can go back and, suggest alternate language for this objective, but that also would impact what's in our current mission statement.
Well, I've provided my opinion, and I realize I'm one of 12. So if others agree with me, I'm fine with going forward with that. If it doesn't rise to the importance that it is to me, I'm understanding, and I'm a team player.
This is Jim Zuck. Maybe the word advancing might be appropriate. I don't know.
And this is Tim Hackman. If it's based on our current mission statement, I'm willing to withdraw my comments.
All right, any other comments on this? All right,
This is
Elton?
Maggie Godbold. I'm fine with the mission statement.
All right, great. All right, Elson, you can move to the next item.
Okay, this next one is 301 land acquisition. This is Cindy McNeil.
Hi, this is Cindy McNeil. I'm manager of the real estate section. So we made a few tweaks on policy 301. So we reiterated that the amount of land will be consistent with adopted service levels for urban, local, and district countywide parks. Resource protected land will not be counted towards the amount of land needed for recreation because you cannot build on protected land. The parkland service levels will be reviewed periodically with the needs assessments to provide equitable access. We're very much looking forward to the PROSA study and aligning the Land Act with the PROSA results. Priority will be given to acquisitions that satisfy One Fairfax policy commitments. New acquisition will be considered in underserved areas. And the service levels can be met in various ways. For example, if there's a large development going in and we can get the developer to construct park features to our standards, we can count that as meeting a service level without the park authority actually having to expend the funds to build the facilities. Are there any questions?
Tim Hackman, I have one. I think it's entirely appropriate that One Fairfax be a consideration in land acquisitions, but land acquisitions are very complex considerations and discussions, which can include service standards and whether the parcel is contiguous to existing parks or fills in a missing connection, and could even affect whether one could accept a proposed proffer or donation of land to the Park Authority from an HOA or things of that nature. So I think that saying it is a priority would potentially tie our hands and create inflexibility in an area where we want to have flexibility. And so I would say consideration can be given. We just take out the section of the language about priority, and we leave the rest of that section 2.4 or bullet the same.
Can I jump in, Faisal?
Yes, sure, Kyle.
Faisal, this is Kyle Stone. My view on that one is actually pretty much diametrically opposed to Tim's. And with what I was going to raise is I don't think just calling something a priority kind of is strong enough. When we just saw the budget presentation, we called 10 things like priorities, and somewhere in there was these are priorities and these are like other priorities kind of thing. So just using the word priority doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. I'd be interested in knowing how we would be giving them priority. What would we be doing to ensure that they're given priority? Otherwise, we get into a situation where the bullet points Tim raised are very easy to kind of supersede a underserved area. There's limited land, there's limited money to purchase it. If our goal is to be equitable and enforce kind of One Fairfax policy commitments, we need to, I think, put some teeth behind it.
So are you thinking of using something like recommendation other than priority?
I'm just criticizing. I don't have anything useful to add. But I do think just simply saying priority will be given to me isn't enough. It doesn't kind of say how that will work in practice.
So J. Cole, Executive Director of Park Authority. So the intent for this one and the intent moving forward, and to answer your how question, is the world opens up a little bit. The world becomes a lot clearer once our PROSA plan is finished. And so the intent here, I think, to sort of hit at both yours and Tim's point, the point here isn't to exclude areas not in equity areas, or to but pick up a property in an equity area where they're very, very highly served with parks, and avoid one in another area that happens to not be an equity area, but is park poor, right? So we need to be, PROSA will tell us that. I think where the priority name would be given, priority term would be given is, if I have two things, everything being equal, low walk to parks needing land, low walk to parks needing land, we're going to prioritize areas in underserved areas. We're going to target areas, especially if they're poorly served by parks. I think we can tweak the language to be both non-exclusionary to other things, but to Kyle's point, there's X amount of land and X amount of dollars. And until those dollars for acquisition get up to the point where we can sort of do everything, we just need to figure out how we're prioritizing those limited funds.
So just to clarify, Jay, are you saying basically priority among the otherwise equals? So if everything else is the same, it's just prioritizing if going to the more needed area, basically.
Correct. And PROSA will tell us what it is. So PROSA, hopefully ignoring equity for a second, if PROSA comes in and we have an acquisition, we should be referring back to PROSA to see how is this community being served? Do we want to spend our limited funds on this parkland, considering that 100% of the residents currently have a 5-minute walk to a park? Maybe we say that to where something would fill a gap that we need or natural resources. On the other side, there might be acquisitions that do fill a green corridor and are huge for ecological purposes, regardless of where it is in the county. Therefore, the reason for buying, and PROSA is going to look at that as well, connections and green corridors, where it's not necessarily so much of people's access to parks, but it's wildlife's access to each other. So there are a whole bunch of things, but yes, everything being equal, if I've got two things in front of me, then we definitely need to be focusing on our priority areas, our equity areas, in order to make our park service level equitable.
I think, yeah, that kind of addresses Tim's point as well, because otherwise equal, and you're prioritizing between the equals, that takes care of, actually that gives us more tools to address that and more flexibility than not, basically, otherwise. So it's yes,
Right,
go
this is
ahead.
Tim. I think a tweak along those lines would, for clarification, would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. All right, Mike.
Yeah, so Jay, this is Mike Thompson. The same, I have similar concern to Tim's, but it's a little bit different in that it's rare that we're looking at two things at the same time that are somewhat equal. It's more normal that we have one thing to consider now, and a year and a half from now, we're looking at something different. And if we say, if no matter what other plans we develop, if our policy says that priority will be given to acquisitions that satisfy the one Fairfax policy, my concern is that we could say, hey, there's this opportunity somewhere else, a green corridor, a piece of property that we can build the indoor track that everybody's been telling us we need to build for 27 years, or whatever. And we could say, well, except we only have X number of dollars for the next 5 years or whatever. Therefore, we can't spend that money because our policy says we have to prioritize based on one Fairfax. And while this satisfies 18 other things, it doesn't necessarily satisfy a one Fairfax priority right now. And so I would just suggest that I completely agree with you on I completely understand I have two things equal, two opportunities. They're both $1 million. One may be a lot bigger in the western part of the county. One may be a lot smaller in the eastern part of the county, but in the eastern part of the county, it addresses the ability for people to get to a park. Okay, yes, I can understand okay, we should wait. We should weigh that one more. I would just suggest that that's often done on the board in those sessions about what we should offer, should we negotiate, etc. And part of me is concerned that this creates a requirement, and that based on what Kyle was saying, the more strong we make it, the more our hands are tied. I totally get that. From a practical implementation standpoint, it's very rare we say, here's $1 million, pick one of these two things, go.
And I understand that. And I think that a lot of that, the lift of that is on us as staff, because once PROSA is done, we can't then sit back and wait for opportunistic acquisitions to come in to fill the gaps that are identified through PROSA. So we're going to have to be proactive in figuring out how to fill these gaps that are identified in PROSA. So the way that we envision it is, when something comes up, to your point, is not that we're going to say, oh, we don't want to spend this money because something else might come up. You would then ask us the question, the board would ask us the question, where are we with our gaps in service for inequity areas? Where are we at filling in all of those gaps? And we would answer, we don't have any opportunities right now. We've looked at this and we've looked at this. This is a good call because of X, Y, and Z. But we're not prospecting necessarily or holding back money to hope that something falls in our lap, because we don't have enough money to do that either, right? But we need to make sure that we ask that question of ourselves when we're spending. If I have $2 million and there's a $1.5 million acquisition, that now I'm done when that one comes up in 5 years. So I think that there's a lot more with this policy. There's a lot more background work and footwork that's going to be needed on our side to position you all as a board to make that call when a opportunity comes up.
All right,
It would just Mike in it. It would just seem to me that this would be we get that checklist now, does it, and I can't remember everything that's on the checklist, but you know, does it fill a need? Is it a historical play? You know, there's that checklist when you guys look at properties. It would just seem to me that we should make this part of that, and maybe it's given more weight or however that process should best work. This language just kind of scares me, that's all.
You know, this is Jim Zook. I'll align myself with Kyle's comments. You know, maybe it's priority consideration should be given to, or however you want to tone that down, but I'm comfortable with the way it's written right now. You know, we all recognize that we've got a very steep hill to climb with regard to the equity provision of access to our park system. And I don't think it's too much of an encumbrance for this board or future boards to have to struggle with that. What does priority mean given the different contexts? I agree with Mike that, you know, you're not likely to have equal proposals submitted at the same time of the same substance that you can make, you know, that kind of judgment easily. But I do think that question needs to be in the forefront of the board when they make a decision, and have the board debate that with regard to whatever the requests for funding are. So I'm comfortable with the language as it is now presented.
Kyle?
Yeah, Kyle Stone. Mike's point is exactly why I'm worried that just saying priority will be given is not strong enough, because he's absolutely right. We're never that I remember being on the board, given the same thing and say, pick one or the other. And there is often long lag time between projects that are acquisition opportunities. And it's very easy for us to just say, ooh, this is the shiny thing in front of us. Let's do it now. And there could be good reasons for it. The opportunities do not grow on trees. But if we're always saying yes to the thing in front of us, I think if there's not some kind of governor put on us to more than just saying priority will be given to, that I don't think will turn the ship around. So I think Mike did a much better job of articulating my point than I did, but just from the other side.
All right, Jay, just in the interest of clarification and simplicity, basically what you're saying is that even though we may have like one thing at a time, there's nothing to compare, but having the equity part, if it's there, it's an added variable and it adds the value to the proposal. It just makes it's another variable to consider basically. And that's something that we would give importance to and attention to.
Yeah, I think that to put a finer point at, there's oftentimes, not every time, but there's oftentimes when we get the park authority staff that we get a lot of pressure to do an acquisition that might not fit into where we're trying to go for equity, for PROSA, for other things. And without some sort of a checkpoint as to, you know, this might not be how we want to spend, you know, this amount of funds, or at least a point to have this conversation in closed session about it, I think that it's gonna fly by, and we're gonna end up spending money on things and then not have any money left to do with the things that we're trying to get done. And understanding the fact that we won't have two properties in the front, and we don't want to end our 6-year CIP cycle with all of the acquisitions money because nothing came up. We want to avoid that as well. And we don't want to spend, you know, the last 6 months on everything because we wanted to wait for the highest bidder, so to speak. But we need some way when something comes up in order to say, you know, where are we with that? And to have the board, you know, pushing staff or whoever it is to say, okay, come and tell me before we vote on this, where we are with our identified needs through the PROSA plan in targeting acquisitions and looking at filling gaps. And if we come back and we say, we've looked at everything right now, nobody's ready to sell, and we haven't come up with anything, you know, this is whatever it is, you know, we think that this does still fill a gap in an area, or this is a high needs area, regardless of whether or not it's an equity area or not, and there's nothing, then we move forward. But I think that without that question of answering it, I think that we're not going to be able to utilize our PROSA plan and move forward in ways of filling in gaps intentionally, as opposed to filling the map up opportunistically.
Thank you.
This is Mike. Jay, first, Kyle, I agree with you that it has to be considered. And so don't misunderstand. I wonder whether or not this language handcuffs us too much. And Jay, to your point, I think this is fair to say. I think most of the pressure on us to purchase property doesn't come from a member of this board. I think that pressure comes from a member of another board. And so I don't know how we solve that pressure point of a group of a member of the Board of Supervisors or a group of supervisors saying, hey, we really need you to go buy X or whatever. But again, I'm all for making it, to your point, an important discussion in the decision-making process. I just want to make sure that in reading this, it's not saying, I read this and thought it might be interpreted to say that if it doesn't meet, given limited resources, that if it doesn't satisfy our one Fairfax policy commitment, then we should not buy it because we will have limited, that's my concern, is that we lock ourselves.
Can I make a suggestion? Because it seems like I think that there's semantics in wording which is why we have lawyers on our board. Thank you very much, Mike Thompson. And Kyle, is there any way that I can get Mike, if you want to look and just propose language to that that doesn't hem us in, and maybe run that by Kyle? Because I think that you guys are on opposite sides and I think everybody else is probably in the middle. And if you guys get us something that says that makes sense.
Sure, I think we're on opposite sides trying to do the same thing. So yeah.
I mean, it's a beautiful partnership.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely.
This is Linwood. My comment on this discussion is just want to make sure we can still take opportunities when they come along. And frankly, if some of the opportunities have been taken decades ago, instead of just more recently, we would probably have a more equitable balance in distribution of parkland right now. It's only recently that it's become as important as it is to that. But anyway, sorry to add comment to that. My actual comment about the language that we're talking about right now is the standards of service guiding our acquisitions and stuff like that. I would like to see the word future worked into that new sentence somewhere for some of the very reasons that I just said. We need to make sure that we buy the properties while they're inexpensive and not the most expensive properties in the county in anticipation of future need. And I'm not saying that we have to do that exclusively or anything else, but to work, I think it would be productive to work the word future need into the new sentence of levels of standards of service that is in the policy statement right now.
All right, anybody else? All right, Allison, you can continue.
I'm sorry. I would just add, I guess, in response to Jay's comment, I guess, will this item be coming back to the board before adoption or not?
Allison or Sarah, could you help me with the order of things or what we can do here?
Sarah Baldwin, Deputy Director. Yes, we will bring the full manual back before it's approved. And after it goes to legal for their review.
Okay, thank you.
Is there consensus to consider my point? About future need?
All right, everybody.
Sure, if they're going to rewrite it, why not?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, so Allison.
All right. Next up is 302, the Park Planning Program. This is Sam Hudson.
Hi, Sam Hudson, Park Planning Branch Manager. So updates to this policy incorporate language that states that park master plans should be linked to the CIP, and also that park master plans should be completed as funding is identified for actual implementation. The proposed updates also incorporate a couple of longstanding parts of our park planning program. This includes trails and special studies. Updates incorporate planning for a variety of activities and user experiences in our parks or complete park experiences. Updates also incorporate equity with an emphasis on data-driven planning and engaging historically underrepresented communities. The proposed policy updates focus in on a few key components of the comprehensive plan, as well as the public facility review process, or the 2232 process, and park authority involvement with development review. And then finally, the updates include a section that links our park planning program to broader county plans and priorities.
Faisal, Tim, I have another comment.
Sure.
On the community engagement, it talks about emphasis on historically underrepresented communities. And my concern there is that the word emphasis implies that that voice in the future will have carry more weight than other voices in the county, and I don't think that's what was intended. And so my suggestion would be to delete the word emphasis and to say include robust engagement of those communities. We want to have them involved. We want them to be active in our discussions. But their voice is one set of voices among all the residents of Fairfax County.
I would love to see, this is Bill Bowie. I would love to see how we could potentially work that in. But in dealing with all of the aspects of equity in One Fairfax, there's going to be some leveling of the playing field at some point. And so while all things are created equal, until we get those voices fully engaged in the conversation, they're not.
Sam, you can continue.
Are we ready to move forward?
Yes, please.
Okay. 303 is park development, and that is Andy Miller.
Hi, I'm Andy Miller, manager of the building branch in planning and development. Policy 303 was modified to recognize that within the parks, there's certain land that's development eligible and certain that really shouldn't be developed. And what it does is it calls that out and says, we don't have to develop it. It specifically says we have an option not to develop. Another change is that needs assessments and vulnerability indexes will be reviewed and considered, and it ties to the discussion we've had for these previous policies. It references policy 302 park planning. It's a necessary precursor to park development, just to set the table, as it were. We reference great parks, great communities, park and rec system master plan, and the guidance it gives. And we reference a number of regulatory documents, including comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, PFM, capital improvement program. And so those are the main changes.
Comments?
Yeah, the only question I have, this is Bill Bowie again, on the equitable distribution of park facilities. I don't know if distribution is the right word because it's not going to be equally distributed across the county. So we need to find something else beside distribution. Maybe equitable consideration of park facilities across the county, but distribution, I don't think is the right word there.
Okay.
And this is Mike Thompson, just to build to your point. Not every community is looking for or needs the same thing. So I think that just reinforces what you're saying, that, you know, you and I talked about this a little bit, I guess at the joint board meeting. It's just one of those things where, you know, we don't want to imply that, hey, we need a rec center for every group of X number of residents or something that has the exact same stuff in it. You know, some people there may be communities that need soccer and other communities that need pickleball. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Or some communities may need a garden versus any type of athletic facility whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, yeah.
This is Maggie. I'm sorry. I just need to understand, because my understanding of the definition of equity does not mean equal. It means providing what is needed to people to bring them to the same kind of level. So I'm just want to make sure I understand, because I don't read this as saying everybody's going to get the same thing or everything is going to be distributed equally. What I'm getting from the word equitable distribution is just what you said, Mike, is, you know, if this community needs tennis courts, then, you know, that's equitable to this other community that needs pickleball. So maybe I'm misunderstanding the policy. I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you, everyone. And I'm sorry, this is Maggie God.
Thank you, Maggie.
This is Jim Zook. I'm wondering whether something such as, you know, equitable provision of park facilities to achieve community needs might be something to consider.
Bill Bowie, I like that, Jim.
And this is Mike. I do, Mike Thompson, I do too. And Maggie, to your point, I was just thrown by the word distribution. So I think Jim resolves that with what he just said.
All right.
This Maggie, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bill, since on a side note, since we are at it, it's high time that we start using cricket examples as well now. Just for the reference.
It's always in the, this is Bill Bowie. It's always in the forefront of my mind, Faisal, as you well know.
Yeah. All right. Ellison.
All right, moving on to 304 is the naming of parks and facilities, and that is Sam Hudson.
Sam Hudson, Park Planning Branch Manager. So the updates to this policy, first, it clearly states that park names are based on geographical, historical, or ecological features that are indigenous to the park site or immediate vicinity. And also that naming a park after an individual, it should only be proposed in rare instances when the contributions of that individual warrant commemoration. And then park facilities are to remain unnamed. However, on a case-by-case basis, they may be named to memorialize significant gifts or contributions to the park system, the park authority, or the county. Proposed updates also encourage renaming under certain circumstances. And that's when a review or an investigation finds that the name is not in alignment with the park authority mission or with One Fairfax. And then finally, of course, the park authority board approves all naming of parks and facilities.
Any comments?
Yeah, this is Mike
Bill
Tom.
Bowie. The only comment I've got is in the second one, the word commemoration, which basically leads me to believe that one has got to die in order for that to happen. So if there's a better word for commemoration, I would appreciate it.
All right, Mike.
Yeah, this is Mike. So if in reading this, the three things, the entity, which I guess is the family combination, whatever, has made a significant gift of land to the authority. 2 is moralized for significant contribution of resources, et cetera, to of Fairfax County Park System. Or then scroll down a chunk. 3 has made a significant contribution to Fairfax County towards the betterment of the county and the park system. I think those are the 3 criteria listed there, if I'm reading correctly through the edits. However, at the front end of the policy, we specifically talk about contribution of the individual to the park authority, the county, or to society as a whole as to warrant commemoration. And I just, when I read to society as a whole, as to warrant commemoration, I see below your 3 criteria, I think only deals with the Fairfax County part. So I'm just wondering, am I missing something? Was that intentional? I just, it feels like there's a criteria in our list missing or an edit that needs to be made further up.
All right. Any other comments?
Yeah, this is.
Sorry, this is Jay Cole, Executive Director, Park Authority. In looking at in doing that portion, we were looking at names that already exist. And so we needed to, for naming of parks, which is a higher level than a facility or a field, right? We have, and for some reason I am losing, the new Lee High School is now called
Lewis
High.
So now we have Lewis High Park, which obviously he did something for the county just in being who he is, but that's more of the next level. And MLK Park would be that level of things. It allows for a commemoration of a park for historical figures sort of outside to link in and not have to make sure that Martin Luther King Jr. didn't specifically work in Fairfax County. So that was my adding into that. I think that we can figure out how to mesh the two, but it was one of those, like, we got to figure out how to get the names of parks that are named for national figures. How do we explain why that it's okay that we have a Lewis High Park and why we have an MLK, Junior Park?
Right, and I'm comfortable with having the MLK Junior Park. That was my point, was I almost felt like we were saying, oh wait, we're not going to allow that in certain cases. I just want to make sure we mesh and end up in the right place. Oh, and this was Mike Thompson. Sorry.
Thank you, Mike.
I believe Dr. Carter has her hand up.
All right, Dr. Carter.
Yes, Bill mentioned commemoration. Could we use the word recognition or special recognition instead? Does that almost get you there, Bill?
Yes, it could.
My comment is similar to this. When I read in the sentence, and it's used in other places also, but the word contribution, to me, although I know clearly what its intent is in this context, could also be considered monetary. And I almost think we could use a better word than contribution. I don't want anybody to ever think that we're selling names of parks for dollars, and that the contribution I associate with dollars more than anything else. Some sort of language along the lines of extraordinary positive impact or something like that works better than contribution for me.
All right. Any other comment?
Faisal, I got one. Ken
Mike.
Quincy.
Please, Ken.
Yeah, I had the same concern as Linwood, just express that in many cases, contribution is just automatically considered monetary. I think we need to clarify with whatever proper wording there is to show that that's not the case. Could be a contribution, could be other than monetary, whatever wording works.
All right. So Allison, back to you.
Okay, moving on to 305 is telecommunications sites, and that will be Cindy McNeil.
Okay, so this is going in a different direction of the discussion so far. Okay, so telecommunications evolves. Many of you are in the profession and you know this, so at where we are right now, we need to balance community and public safety demands for telecommunications. The Park Authority remains the largest landowner, and we remain a very popular party to establish telecommunications. We are going to review telecommunications in coordination with the new Park Policy 200, which is use of parkland for non-park purposes. We always had been doing that, but now we're going to formally do it, which, you know, Policy 200 strengthen our position. We are saying that the telecommunications developer is responsible for compliance with the county comp plan or other county agency requirements. That includes public works, structural permits, or the fire department's diesel fuel requirements for generators. The telecommunications developer is responsible for performing public outreach in coordination with the Park Authority. They are responsible for doing the balloon fly and for coordinating with our public information office on notifying and letting people know when events are taking place. And we're going to ask that the telecommunications developer provide landscaping as approved by the Park Authority. We want the landscaping installed as the site is being developed, not as an after fact. So are there any questions?
This is Linwood. I have a comment about the first bullet, which my interpretation of it is that it is attempting to replace several of the other bullets for simplicity, which I support 100%. But in some of the bullets, or one of the bullets that's being deleted, it talks about cultural and natural resources. And I would like to see the cultural and natural resources integrated into that first bullet and included with the view shed and character and those kind of things.
All right. Anybody else?
Yes, this is Jim Zook. Cindy, I've forgotten, I maybe read it too fast, whether we have provisions for removal of towers in the event they're no longer necessary.
That's written into the license agreements, yes. When they become no longer useful, the applicant is responsible for removing all of the equipment. And we actually had that happen in South Run. And we made them take they were co-located in a Dominion Virginia Power tower. And we made them take everything off and clean up the park before they got out of there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Allison.
Great. And last but not least for tonight is 306, the alcohol policy. And that's Britta Stratford.
Hi, my camera is on the fritz, but anyway, this is Britta Stratford, Park Services, and not too many changes to the alcohol policy, just a few clarifications defining the types of events that require alcohol beverage use applications, and then also added languages about the additional permits that may be required for sales at events. Clarification on number 3 for who is approving the new areas, adding executive to just director. And then finally, we updated some of the references for the alcohol parks and facilities listing.
All right, any questions, comments?
Yeah, this is Mike. Just, does it make any sense at all to, instead of specifically calling out, for example, the one permit, to be more broad and just say all state and all required state and county permits. And then instead of, if there's a change in the future, having to change the words of the policy.
There are specific things that outline any state or Virginia ABC laws further down in that policy. So these are just referencing specific park authority.
I know, I guess what I'm, except that it says, for example, you're inserting language, a business activity license will also be required.
That was, oh, sorry, go ahead.
If that name ever gets changed, then theoretically you're making us come back and change the policy. I'm just suggesting, is that, can we use broader terms so that it's all inclusive, so that if the names of stuff change, that we're covered. That's all. Maybe it doesn't work. I hate noting very specific policies in our policies for in case names change or requirements change or something's added and our policy becomes out of date. That's all.
Okay.
Anything else, anybody?
All right, then moving on, the next time we'll come back to you with the last set of policies will be the November 9th meeting, and that will look at the 400 policies. And that's the end of that.
Thank you, Allison. And since we had all the comments already, so I hereby adjourned the Board and Administration Committee meeting.
Thank you, Faisal. On time. This is Bill Bowie.
Try, sir.
I would like to start the Planning and Development Committee meeting and turn it over to Chairman Ken Quincy.
Ken Quincy, and before we start, Mr. Chairman, this will noticeably overlap into the board meeting time.
Yes, it will, sir. Proceed.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Ken Quincy, and I will call the Planning and Development Committee to order and turn it over to Mr. Paul Sherry to introduce the item. Paul?
Right, Paul Shirey, Planning and Development Division, and I'll make this quick. The Park Authority Acting Executive Director, which that is wrong, it's the Executive Director, recommends approval of the Planning and Development Division Annual Work Plan for FY23. Board action is requested on October 26th, 2022, so that priority projects can be incorporated into the Planning and Development Work Plan and initiated in FY23 to meet the proposed project schedules. Staff presented the proposed FY23 work plan for discussion on September 14th of this year, and the FY23 work plan reflects the continuation of active projects with schedules that extend into FY23 and beyond, as well as projects that are scheduled to start in FY23 as included in the FY22 to 26 CIP, which was approved last year. So I can stop here. You guys have seen the slides before, but I can walk through those real quickly if you want.
Any comments in that regard?
Ken, Tim Hackman, just one quick one. With respect to the COVID memorial, that COVID is still disrupting our lives, and the loss of life that has resulted is tragic. I understand that we've been tasked to work on a planning and siting for the memorial. I think at the time, my understanding was the mission was to look at siting in parks or non-parks, i.e. other governmental or general governmental property. So I think our scope of work, at least as it was listed in the introductory memo to this item and in the posted materials, was too narrow, and I think we need to include in our work effort looking at non-park related sites as well as park related sites. That was it. Thank you very much.
Hi, Tim. This is Jay Cole, Executive Director, Park Authority. We are working on a site selection. As of right now, it's determined to not be on Parkland, the final site. However, because FCPA does pretty better than anybody else, we are staying on, and our wonderful staff of designers are staying on to design it. So that's why it's still on the work program.
Great. Thank you very much for that clarification,
You're
Tim
welcome.
Hackman.
Okay, any other comments and discussion? Is there a consensus to move this forward to the board?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Ken Quincy again. I will now ask Melissa Emery to introduce the next item. Melissa.
Melissa Emery, Planning and Development. This is for the scope approval for the Burke Lake Marina maintenance project. So we've got as a couple of erosion and drainage issues that this project will address. The project team recommends the following scope. We'll be looking to stabilize the beach area between the two existing floating docks with timber step downs, making it easier to launch boats at various lake levels. The drainage improvements around and adjacent to the bathhouse and the restrooms to redirect and slow down runoff. And then armoring approximately 90 linear feet of the shoreline bank with imbricated stone, and that would look similar to what is shown there on the graphic on the right. That would be just adjacent to the launch area, which would reduce erosion and allow pedestrian access up to the edge of the lake. And then the other part of this would just be relocating some of the informational signs to a more accessible location. Cost estimate for this is $1.5 million. There'd be no change in maintenance costs, no additional expected revenue, and then a life cycle of $1.5 million in year 20. Fairly quick schedule on this one. We are looking to finish up scope design and permitting this fall, going into construction with project completion expected in the spring of 23. Questions?
Ken Quincy, I'll start with the questions coming from our Springfield board member.
Springfield board member loves this. I think I put my first canoe into Burke Lake at this location when I was probably 4 years old, and sometimes I feel like it's the exact same stuff. So I'm all for improving it and making it better. I would say that I think that I know we say the maintenance costs will stay the same. I think we're going to hurt fewer boats. So because of the rocks and stuff. So I think that the visitors to the park will appreciate the improvement a lot.
Thank you, Mike. Any other comments, discussion? Is there consensus to move this one forward?
Yes.
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 Yep. Okay, Ken Quincy again, and I will now ask Tom McFarland to introduce the next item.
Hi, Tom McFarland, Trails Program Manager in the Planning and Development Division. This item is for the approval of a project scope to design and construct a new fiberglass bridge over an unnamed tributary in Colvin Run in Lake Fairfax Park, Hunter Mill District. Park Authority Director recommends approval of the project scope to design and construct a new fiberglass bridge over an unnamed tributary in Colvin Run in Lake Fairfax Park. Board action is requested on October 26th. Board approved a list of projects for funding in the 2020 park bond in October 2021. List of project includes the construction of this bridge in Lake Fairfax Park. Proposed improvements will reduce erosion and other stream impacts caused by mountain bikers riding down the stream bank and fording the stream with no crossing. Scope of work of this project includes purchase and installation of the bridge, including permitting, structural design, and related inspections. Detailed cost estimate for the design improvements as outlined above is $94,000. The project will not generate any additional revenue. Staff estimates an increase of $289 in annual maintenance costs and a life cycle replacement cost of $125,000 in 50 years. Scope is pretty quick. Scope is October of 22. Design is July of 23, construction next year in October of 23. Based on the scope estimate, funding in the amount of $94,000 is necessary for the construction of the project. Funding is available in the amount of $94,000 in PR 148006 Lake Fairfax Bridge in the 2020 park bond.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? We can start with our, excuse me, our Hunter Mill District Representative.
All in favor of it. Let's go.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Is there a consensus to move this one forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Ken Quincy again, and don't go anywhere, Tom. You're going to introduce the next item too.
Tom McFarland, Charles Program Manager, Planning Development. This item is for the approval of project scope to design and install 2 fiberglass bridges, repave approximately 7,000 linear feet of trail, and various drainage improvements in the South Run Stream Valley Park between Hoos Road and South Run Road. Park Authority Director recommends approval of the project scope to design the 7,000 feet of linear trail paving and the 2 fiberglass bridges. Board action is requested October 26, 22. On October 2017, Park Authority Board approved the allocation of 2016 park bond funding for trail projects, and included this South Run Stream Valley Trail project. Proposed improvements will create a continuous trail network in the area suitable by a variety of trail users. Trails and fair weather crossings in a section of South Run were originally constructed with the surrounding Newington Forest community in 1980. In addition, the Stream Valley Trail to Hoos Road was last improved around 2000. All of these assets have reached the end of their service life and will require replacement. Detailed cost estimate for the design of trail improvements outlined above is $495,900. Project will not generate any additional revenue. Staff estimates an increase of $578 in annual maintenance costs and life cycle replacement costs of $250,000 in year 50 for the replacement of the 2 bridges. Proposed timeline for the project is scope October 22, design October 23, construction June of 2024. Based on scope estimate, funding an amount of $495,900 is necessary for the construction of the project. Funding is currently available in $495,900 in PR 78098 South Run Stream Valley Park Trail Improvements in the 2016 park bond.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Ken Quincy, if there's any discussion, comments I'd like to have from that district's representative on the board. Nothing. Okay, is there a consensus to move this one forward?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Ken Quincy, I will now ask Stephanie Cornejo to introduce the next item.
Hello, good evening. My name is Stephanie Cornejo, Long Range Planning Section Chief. I'm delighted to provide an update on the Parks, Recreation, Open Space and Access Strategy, also known as PROSA. We'll go over the main project objectives, project schedule, elements of the project, and the public engagement. As we go to the next slide, we are spearheading PROSA because the Parks and Recreation System Master Plan goals and the Park Authority's strategic plans, objectives, and policies. More specifically, the strategic plan outlines an action step to develop and implement an approach to county park planning and capital projects that considers resource protection, service level delivery, equity, recreation, and community needs. PROSA will also support FCPA's CAPA reaccreditation in 2023. As we go to the next slide, PROSA is a strategy to create an equitable park system where residents can access a quality park within a 10-minute walk from their home. The strategy will provide a path for improved park access and provide a balance of recreational experiences. To get there, we'll identify 10-minute walk access gaps to parks, take into account complete parks by determining the types of recreation categories experiences, such as active recreation, passive contemplative experiences, and social gathering, and define which facility types generally fall into these experiences to form a complete park. We'll examine habitat connectivity, and then we'll take all the data and look at it through an equity lens. That is to say, factoring in equity using demographics and socioeconomic data to help analyze and prioritize needs. The project schedule is anticipated to occur over 14 months with completion in summer 2023. As we go to the next slide, you'll see that we have 6 primary project phases. Currently, we're in both the analysis and preliminary report development phase and the public engagement phase. As we go to the next slide, thank you. We'll provide timely updates on PROSA in step with the project and the project schedule to the Park Authority Board. We'll provide an update on the public engagement and the feedback we received in this current phase in winter 2022. We'll highlight the core components and findings in the draft PROSA strategy in spring 2023. And we'll come back next summer and summer of next year with the final PROSA strategy report. And next we'll dive into the elements of the report. For the 10-minute walk analysis, our goal is to identify which households can and cannot have access to an FCPA park entrance within a 10-minute walk from their home. In fact, 52% of residents can access an FCPA park entrance within 10 minutes from their residence. We'll identify geographic priority areas to improve walk access to FCPA parks and identify opportunities to increase the 10-minute walk through existing and future parkland or trails. Next, we'll look at complete park experiences. PROSA is a strategy to create an equitable park system where residents can access a variety of park experiences. To do so, we'll look at complete park experiences, which consists of active recreation, passive contemplative recreation, social gathering opportunities, and natural cultural recreation. For this component of PROSA, we're going to identify which areas do not have access to the primary experience categories within a 10-minute walk or 5-minute drive from their home. We'll also evaluate parks on based on a park score to understand the balance of these primary core experiences at park sites. Additionally, and next, we'll also look at habitat connectivity and identify opportunities to improve habitat health at existing parks and identify where there are opportunities to expand habitat connectivity through existing parkland or potential future parkland acquisition. And most importantly, we will use an equity lens to analyze and prioritize projects. We'll utilize One Fairfax as a foundation, using One Fairfax's tools and data, and we'll build on the county's vulnerability index as a foundation for our analysis and findings. As we go to the next slide, we would like to highlight there are 2 phases for public engagement with PROSA. The first phase is taking place right now to learn about the values of the community. We're asking the community what barriers they perceive or experience when accessing parks and understand more about park experiences. The second phase will take place in the spring of next year when we will release the draft elements of the PROSA strategy. Our current phase of public engagement includes a project website, an online and printed survey, and we're going to host virtual community meetings and focus groups and attend community events. One of our goals in the public engagement is to ensure that our engagement is capturing diverse voices in the community, and we'll adapt as needed to ensure that we're capturing diverse perspectives in the community at appropriate junctures in the project. And with that said, we greatly appreciate your time and attention. Thank you very much. At this point, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Ken Quincy, questions? The importance of this project, as we've learned from previous discussions, can't be underestimated. It's very important to our operation. So, questions, comments?
Yes, I have one. This is Jim Zook,
Jim?
or maybe 2. With regard to this schedule, and this probably to Jay, how are we in sync with the expectation that I think we had when we met with the Board of Supervisors on when we'd be back to them with a more definitive explanation of what we needed and why?
So PROSA mixes a little bit of acquisition, a little bit of CIP, it sort of sprinkles everything in. So when we're talking about our our contract work on equity in terms of the revenue fund and where we are right now, that's that exercise. PROSA comes in the middle as sort of the meat of the middle before we get into the next phase of equity, which is more of the structural parks elements of equity and providing our service delivery strategy for our parks and open spaces. And so I think it's not independent of each other. It's just, this is the first phase, is the revenue phase portion that will hopefully also give a little bit more relief to allow us to focus on solving a lot of the issues that Stephanie will bring to us. We hope that there aren't any issues, but if there are gaps in service that Stephanie gives us, it gives us a little bit more flexibility to handle them. I hope
Okay.
that answers your question.
Thank you. That's helpful. The second question is, or observation, is that many areas of the county are very, very, very low density development. And I think when we think in terms of the 10-minute walk to recreational facilities, we might need to focus that more on the higher density, whether that be very high density or subdivision kinds of development. I know from past experiences that, for example, in the Occoquan area where it was very low density, we have, I believe the county still has a standard for lesser applicability or approachability to libraries or to fire protection services even. So in those areas, most people have the ability to access facilities through other means than walking. So I don't know how we'll incorporate that, but it's something that I think we ought to consider.
And I'll let Stephanie add in. I think that it's important to note, especially for PROSA, that a lot of the work is sort of just the facts. We need to have a really strong data-driven baseline of things to look at. And then after that, that's when the art comes in, and that's when Stephanie starts to make the big bucks of looking into all of those and weighing, high density areas versus low density areas, places where perhaps a walk isn't possible because there's a lot of industrial or whatever it is. And that's where we sort of start to separate the curve from the way a little bit in there. We're not anticipating that PROSA spits out an answer by itself, that we never have to then have a planning exercise around it of looking into things and digesting what it is that we're looking at. It's really the same thing when talking about acquisitions. And if there's not a 10-minute walk, we're not going to jump to acquisitions. It might be a sidewalk. Like a sidewalk might get us there, in which case we're not looking at an acquisition. We're reaching out to FCDOT to figure out how we can connect a specific community to a park. So I think that, yes, all of those things are considered, and please don't think that Stephanie's going to give us the answer. She's going to give us the hard data, and then we're going to work and do some comprehensive planning to get to the answer.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Yeah, this is Kyle Stone. I
Kyle?
just have a question on the engagement strategy on the slide deck. I saw that there was one on the 16th, but I'm looking at the PROSA web page, and I'm only seeing two, the 25th and 1st.
Yeah, as part, this is Sam Hudson, Park Planning Manager. As we're looking at our engagement strategy and really focusing in on engaging with those underrepresented communities, we're actually, we are strategizing around doing more on the ground in the community outreach, perhaps for that last date. So that's why you see that on the website and you see something different in the package.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions, comments? Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. Ken Quincy, if there's no further comments or discussions, I will adjourn the Planning and Development Committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Quincy. Fine job, as always. Get this back on track. I'd like to call to order the October 12th meeting of the Fairfax County Park Authority Board. We always start our meetings with a public comment period. So I will ask PIO Judy Peterson if there are any speakers signed up this evening.
Mr. Chairman, we don't have any speakers this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then we will move on to the administrative items. Countywide admin item number 1 is the adoption of the minutes of the September 28th, 2022 Park Authority Board meeting.
This is Maggie Godbold. I will second the motion that we adopt the minutes of the September 28th board meeting.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. Action items countywide. Action item number 1 was the Fairfax County Park Foundation bylaws revision.
Right, this is Faisal Khan. I make a motion to approve the Fairfax County Park Foundation bylaws revision.
And this is Maggie Godbold. I second that motion.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. In the Springfield District, A2, scope approval, Burke Lake Park Marina maintenance.
This is Mike Thompson. I move that the board approve the Burke Lake Park Marina maintenance scope.
Mr. Quincy, would you like to second that motion?
I've lost my sound.
You're good now.
You're
I'm
good now.
Okay, I've been
Yeah.
playing it. I'll second the motion, sorry.
Okay, is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. Countywide A3 FY 2024 general fund budget process. Mr. Quincy,
Can you hear me?
I can now.
Oh, okay. Ken Quincy, I've lost the picture too. Lost everything. Okay, Ken Quincy, I make a motion to approve the FY 2024 general fund budget process.
This is Maggie Godbold. I second the motion.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. Information items, countywide information item number 1 was the FY 2024 general fund budget process. And countywide information item number 2 was the park recreation, open space and access strategy project update that we got earlier this evening. Chairman's matters. I'll try to make this quick because we're gonna try to get Linwood home before the lights go out. First of all, I want to thank the Board of Supervisors and the county executive for approving our carryover funds yesterday. They were as generous as they could be, and they were moved over, and details to follow. But certainly, we've been working hand in glove with those folks, and everything went well. I'm continuing to get good feedback from the Board of Supervisors, from members of the board on the joint meeting that was held. The presentation by the consultant was outstanding and opened a lot of eyes and caused a lot of discussion among the board members, especially generated by those members who had served on the Park Authority Board previously, Supervisor Alcorn and Supervisor Lusk. Supervisor Faust was also very, very engaged, and I had a long talk with Chairman McKay as well. But they all say that they are dedicated to working with us to do away with those inequities as we possibly can and just make it a fair system across all, knowing that the way that we're structured today is not necessarily going to work. So we're going to try to figure that out, but really, really good feedback from them. I want to give a shout out to school board member Megan McLaughlin. Megan started advocating for bathrooms at the high school stadium facilities. Mr. Quincy will understand this, starting back when we were on the synthetic turf task force some years ago.
I remember.
And it was a constant bang the drum moment from Megan. And even when she was appointed to the Sports Tourism Task Force, she banged home again the fact that we need bathrooms at all of the high school facilities. Well, Megan got her wish, and the Board of Supervisors yesterday approved monies to make sure that we have bathroom facilities at all of the high school stadium fields. And the contribution by the Board of Supervisors was matched by a contribution, an equal contribution from the school system. So again, congratulations to Megan for your advocacy and your passion. You got it done. Last weekend, I think I told you previously about the Vietnam Golf Association holding their national championship at Laurel Hill. It was an overwhelming success. They had over 170 players. They came from most of the states. They came from Canada, and we also had members that participated from Vietnam. The youngest player was 11 years old from Arizona with an adjusted handicap of 13, playing from the ladies' tees, and he placed third in the women's division. Second place in the ladies was won by a young lady, Felicity Chen, who is a junior at South Lakes High School. And the oldest player was 73 years old, and they all had a great time participating. I'm actually going to have a debrief with part of the VGA team tomorrow, and it's something that they'd certainly like to do again. Bottom line is they raised $40,000 for Laurel Hill over the weekend. Not a bad take. So talk about sports tourism. I got them engaged with Visit Fairfax, who was able to get them hotels, set up hospitality rooms, and they are just ecstatic about the treatment that they got from the Park Authority and from Fairfax County. So that's good. We had our last fall outdoor racquetball, handball, paddleball shootout last weekend. We had over 50 players, again, from all across the country, and players also from Bolivia and Mexico. A fun time. It was a little chilly. A fun time was had by all. But again, thanks to the great facilities that we offer as a park authority. Couple more things. Just want to make sure that since we do have all of our budget instructions and what we're going to be asking for, that you contact your Board of Supervisors members and advocate as much as you can so we can push that through. Really appreciate you doing that. And last but not least, if you haven't seen it, you must catch In the Know with Dr. Adu on the YouTube channel. It is some of the best entertainment and education that you could ever see. And I am so happy that YouTuber Dr. Adu is on our board. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jay.
Thank you, Bill. It's a very hard act to follow. I too have watched In the Know with Dr. Adu, and I concur that it is some of the best YouTube channel watching that you could have on a random Tuesday evening. Allison, could you pull up the thank you. I'm going to spend the entirety of my time bragging on staff, so that's a really fun time in general. Next slide. last board, I talked about having just done the Fairfax County, the rodeo, which is a competition amongst operations staff and DPWES, FCPA, and schools. And I wanted to take this because it was that day. We didn't have time to highlight all of the winners. So I wanted to take this time to highlight all of our winners because we all love winning. Jordan Simpson from the mobile crew, Gregory Greenhow from the mobile crew, Adrian Sebrel from Area 3, Dave Murphy from Area 5, and Carl Meadows from Huntley Meadows, all won in various categories. So it was a really phenomenal day in general, and I really had a good time competing first, and also watching our staff do what they do so very, very well. Next slide. Okay, on October 6th, we had our Trailblazers Awards, which is probably one of my favorite days here. It happened when I first started about a month or so into starting. And I remember experiencing and thinking, this is really great. Is this going to be my favorite? No, don't pick a favorite. Don't pick a favorite. Don't pick a favorite. Now that I've gone through a year, I think that this is really such a great day. We had beautiful weather at Lake Fairfax Park, and Trailblazers are awards created by staff, given to staff. We have nothing to do with it besides giving them funding to be able to eat really well, and they get to really good food, and it's fellowshipping, and it's just a really good day to remember why it is that we do what it is that we do. I'm going to go over some photos from the event. Next slide. Again, highlighting some of the winners. The project of the year was the pickleball team, all the way from planning through construction, voted on again by peers in the Park Authority. Next slide. Customer Service Excellence Award for a team went to the golf division this year. Might be why Laurel Hill was able to get those really great golf tournaments. It's really because of the customer service excellence that comes out of the golf division, and we really appreciate all the work that they did. On Customer Service Excellence Individual went to Laura Nelson Bollock. That's a picture of her. She's in rec services. And so she does phenomenal work for Cindy, and we were really happy to give her that award. Next slide. We were really excited. The site of the year, which includes all of the sites, went to Area 3 maintenance. And that's the maintenance crew that was there, the maintenance yard that was there to accept award for site of the year. That's a big award, and we were really excited. They have matching hats. We're really excited to see them. Next slide. Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Award, group award, went to the people working on Latino Conservation Week. That's the picture up on top. We had a really phenomenal event at Justice Park, and a lot of things for Latino Conservation Week. They really went all out to make sure that we are inclusive and providing services to all of the residents of the county. Stewardship and Sustainability Award individual went to Owen Wilson from Resource Management Division. Next slide. Supervisor of the Year went to Betty Cook, Cub Run Rec Center. Healthy Lifestyle Champion went to Kurt Lauer, South Run Rec Center. And the other awards that people who aren't pictured, probably because we were working them too hard to make it out for the day. Employee of the Year went to Sashi Dua, excuse me. Stewardship and Sustainability Award group went to Laura Short, Bob Rogers, and Oakmar Rec Center. So those are all of the Trailblazer Awards. Again, it's a phenomenal day. Everybody was very excited. And in general, I just want to thank staff. A lot of the stuff that you saw today came out of a lot of hard work from staff. Stephanie and her group and Sam on the PROSA plan. That's a really heavy lift to be doing, and they're doing a phenomenal job on it. And the policies, I'm just calling out two groups. And the policies, Allison has done a phenomenal job of wrangling, as much as conversation happens during the board on policies, 3 times as many conversations happen with staff on policies. So I want to thank her for wrangling up everything to make sure we have everything ready to go for Sarah, for Capra. And with that, I will turn it back over.
Thank you, Jay. This is Bill Bowie. All right, let's start with the YouTuber tonight, Dr. Adu.
Thank you, Chairman, and for your shout out
but I will pass.
Dr. Carter.
Good evening. I'll pass.
All right, Maggie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll pass also.
Okay, Linwood,
Pass.
Tim,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I pass.
Faisal.
Everybody's passing, so I gotta say something here. So just a quick heads up that you all will be hearing from me. It's about time that I'm working on the nominations for next year. So you all will be hearing from me soon. I'll start making calls. And kudos to the staff for such a wonderful job they're doing. And only because of my brother Linwood, I'll pass.
Ken,
I better pass before my connection goes bad again.
Kyle,
Nothing for me, thank you.
Mike,
Pass.
Jim.
I pass, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for all that you do and the joy that you bring to everybody. We certainly appreciate it. And I don't think I'll be at the next meeting, but I'll know in the next couple of days. I'm gonna try to do a Ron Kendall, Jim Zook kind of thing that my wife is gonna take me off to. So with that, we are adjourned. Have a great evening and thanks again.
Thank
Good
you.
night, all.
Night, everybody.
Night. Bye-bye.